Glenn. Those of you who are with me, good night. Thanks for being here, and I'm pleased that you're here. Um, Tonight is a special episode. Last night, or tonight, we're going to be watching yesterday's Jamaica leadership debate. We want to provide sort of a thorough and independent assessment of the performance of both the Prime Minister, Andrew Holness, and also the opposition leader, Mark Golden. We want to make sure that we're breaking down the moments, we're performing a very fair analysis based on what was actually said. This head-to-head meeting between both parties went, to me, from where I sat, very well. So we'll be watching each question, reacting, and scoring both candidates in real time. I will give my commentary after each question, but I also want your input in the chat. Who answered better, who dodged, and who looked like a real leader. Now, I will say this is a post-debate evaluation, and to be honest, if you're Jamaican, you probably walk away feeling proud about the debate, how both parties conducted themselves. You also feel good about the questions that were asked. And a lot of times in this region, if you're in the US, for example, it almost seems like it's a very staged environment where the questions are not inquisitive, they're not intrusive, and they don't provide the context to allow you to make an informed decision. Now, my understanding is that the preliminary results that were provided, good evening, Drew Ross, the preliminary results that were provided seem to indicate that the views expressed by those who were part of that evaluation process were along party lines in terms of who won. I have no party affiliation. No party affiliation. The question from Drew Ross is, was it better than the USA debate? I think so. I mean, I think it was better in a lot of contexts, which is, first of all, I think both parties are extremely informed. They didn't just give topical answers like Trump did when he was involved with Kamala. They gave very substantive answers. And I think in those instances, what you want, the first question you ask yourself in those situations is, can I see this person leading the country? Can I see this person being, if it's a republic, a prime minister, or in our case, in Jamaica, in our public, sorry, president, or in our case, in Jamaica, prime minister? How would I view them in that context? I think one could walk away feeling proud given how they came across. Now, the nature of the questions, the type of questions, the substantive aspects of the questions were interesting in terms of how they respond. Now, in assessing a debate, you have to think about the criteria and factors. So if you just think about it, there's about sort of 5 different criteria. One is about content and evidence, and that's weighted more. So you'd mark these out of 100% or out of 10. And you say in terms of content and evidence, the person's response is clear, factual, and relevant, has to be specific, and provide realistic solutions to tie it to, say, Jamaica, for example, if that's what the question is about. And they have to directly answer the question and don't dodge the question, right? That's important. Secondly, how are they organized? Are they strategic? How they structure the presentation? Is it well structured in all aspects of it? The beginning, the middle, and the end? Is it focused on coherent message? Do you understand what you're talking about? Is it clear? And is it sort of thoughtful and strategic in terms of how they present what they present? Third, when you're refuting, and there's always going to be a component of the interview where you have a chance to refute what your opponent says, does it respond to the opponent's claims, dealt exactly what they talked about, And is it effective? Something like counter punching like in boxing. Fourth is around how do you deliver? And the substance of your delivery is important, as we talked about in terms of evidentiary. What's the delivery style? Do you appear impactful? Do you appear like a leader? That's important. So you're confident, you're persuasive in how you communicate. Do you have, and it's important to observe how the person is both verbally in terms of how they communicate, but also body language is important. Do they seem like they are authoritative? Are they credible? Do they come across as if they belong? That's important. And last but not least, are they respectful? Right? Sometimes you'll go personal. It may appear personal because of the nature of the question, what you're talking about. But are they professional in just what they're doing? So those are some of the key things. Now, for tonight's discussion, I will give credit to TVJ because I borrowed from them the interview. And the reason why I did that is because it's important, as I said before, to observe the debaters and how they conduct themselves, along with listening to what they're saying, right? The questions, to me, have to be intrusive, have to be thoughtful, have to be strategic, have to go to the heart of what the country needs to address as a country, challenging, and have the debaters think about their response and not just come with some cookie-cutter pre-prepared response, but also I need to be respectful. So as I said, I borrowed this from TVJ, so I give credit to TVJ for this, and we go through it. Now, I think there are about 18 questions. We're going to list each questions first. We're going to list the responses, and then what we'd like you to do if you're in the chat is provide your grading for both of the participants. Now, this is important. I know a lot of people from Jamaica are affiliated with one party or the next. They cannot see further than from their nose. I hate to be that, to be crude, but because that's all they think about. If I'm a JLP, whatever my party person does, my leader does, it's right, and the other person is wrong. Even in debate forums, when the other party did better, you still can't be objective enough to really come out. I would like us to change that concept, that perspective tonight. And we'll just grade it based on the person's initial response. And if they have a follow-up, their follow-up response, not be parochial in terms of how we think about how we grade. All right? So that's the level playing field that we should think about. So we're going to do question by question. So let me now go put the moderator on the stage to talk through this, and then we go through each question. And please do your grading based on the criteria stipulated previously.
Good evening. Welcome to the final of 3 general election debates organized by the Jamaica Debates Commission, staged before a live studio audience. The debates are intended to assist in identifying, clarifying, and understanding the issues being presented in this general election campaign. This evening's debate focuses on the leaders. Members of the panel of questioners are Dion Jackson Miller, Radio Jamaica 94 FM, and Giovanni Dennis, CVM TV. Taking and presenting questions from the public is our social media editor, Amoy Harriott, from CVM TV. I am your moderator, Archibald Gordon. As is customary, the audience is not to applaud the debaters except for now, after we announce each debater. Tonight, representing the People's National Party is party leader Mr. Mark Golding. Representing the Jamaica Labour Party is party leader Dr. Andrew Holness. The guidelines for tonight's debates have been previously agreed and are posted on the Debate Commission's website at www.jamaicadebatescommission.org. The guidelines include questions being no longer than 30 seconds, and each debater is allowed 90 seconds to respond to each question, and rebuttals are limited to 45 seconds. The questions posed in tonight's debate will come from two sources. The first source is you, the public. Send us your questions via direct message on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok to Jamaica Debates. These will be checked, selected, and asked by our social media editor. The second source of questions is from our panel of journalists. Questions are not influenced by the Jamaica Debates Commission in any way. Our sign language interpreters tonight are Dorothy Williams and Terry-Ann Bernard from the Caribbean Christian Center for the Deaf. Based on a previous coin toss, our first question tonight comes from Dion Jackson Miller of the RGR Group, and it will be directed to Dr. Andrew Holness.
Dr. Holness, government members have recommended taking the Auditor General off the Integrity Commission. There have been changes made by your administration to the Office of Political Ombudsman that have virtually destroyed its effectiveness as a check on the behavior of politicians. And there have been constant attacks by members of your administration on the Integrity Commission and on media and civil society groups that criticize your administration. Shouldn't Jamaicans be concerned about what appears to be a pattern by your administration of undermining oversight bodies in the public sector, civil society, and media?
There is absolutely no attempt by my administration, and indeed myself, to undermine any oversight body. Indeed, we have acted to strengthen and make them far more efficient. In placing the oversight of the political ombudsman under the office of the Electoral Commission, that's a move to strengthen and give it far more institutional framework. I myself have been very complimentary and acted in a very dignified way as it relates to the Integrity Commission.
Mr. Golding will have the opportunity to respond.
There has been a definite pattern of hostility from the Jamaica Labour Party government towards the institutions mentioned in the question, in particular the Integrity Commission, largely because it is well known that there are at least 10 members of Parliament who are under investigation for illicit enrichment, a serious corruption offence, of which the only one to be known is the one for whom a report has been completed and sent to the Parliament, which is you, Andrew. As a result of that, they have done their very best to try to neuter that critical institution, including the Prime Minister bringing that institution to court to undermine its effectiveness and indeed eliminate it entirely.
Our next question comes from Giovanni.
Now, I'm a little bit surprised that on that question that Holness was given a rebuttal. So let me just play this. I'm going to play the next question first, because I want to see your score and that question. But let me just see if there was another question first. And I'll stop before we get to that question. So this was question one about the attack on the Integrity Commission and, say, journalists. And the Prime Minister said that that's basically saying that he's being complimentary and that doesn't occur. And the opposition basically says that's not the case and needs to be investigated. So I want to hear from you who you think won that question. Was that Andrew or was that Mark? Let me just see if there's man said he was being distracted, but went on later in the day to attack his wife. Okay, we'll get to that. We'll get to that because I'm very informed about the Integrity Commission actually and what transpired. But let's think about what the question asked though. Has there been attacks by the Prime Minister and his party on the Integrity Commission and on those who may have criticized them? If you guys are familiar with the situation, let me know. Because it's important to be familiar with some of these situations to make an informed decision and to provide perspective, right? In terms of who may have been more forthright, more truthful about question one. The opposition says that the Prime Minister's office has really undermined the organization, and the Prime Minister said otherwise. So let me just give my perspective in terms of that. It's very hard to judge who said sort of won question one, but I'll say this. I did a show on the Integrity Commission and the Prime Minister. I am very in-depthly familiar with this. My show that I did was more around what transpired, not casting aspersion, just giving the facts. Subsequently, I have seen in a number of instances, both the Prime Minister and his party, I think I put up an article today on it, going after the Integrity Commission. And I've also called out the fact that the composition of the Integrity Commission is beyond reproach, just individuals that comprise it. And yet the Prime Minister did praise the Commission first when it was established. And before I wouldn't even say they accused him, before they brought up the report that questioned some of his financials. So I don't think it's accurate for him to say he and his party has not criticized them. And I think Golden's perspective that he has is correct. I'm really surprised there wasn't a follow-up question challenging him and I'm surprised Golden didn't point to specific individuals and specifically what they said in doing so. It's very important in these situations for the persons involved to understand anticipate some of these questions and to have factual evidence to point to specific situations to substantiate their position in the situation. So if I was to judge this based on content and evidence, based on how it was presented, I didn't see any refuting going on, and based on delivery, the Prime Minister sounded credible and forceful. I thought Golden, though, in terms of the substance of his answer, was correct and did a better job, even though from a presentation standpoint, the Prime Minister did a better job. Let me just see if they go to the second question. I'll give my grading for the first.
Barney Dennis, and it goes to Mr. Mark Golding.
Right. So I don't think they did the best job. The moderator, the questioner, the question initially was good, but they didn't ask Golden to rebut what was said by Golden, which is supposed to be just standard part. You got 45 seconds to rebut. But if I'm grading, I'm going to say that Golden won question one, based mainly on you give 30% for substance, right? I said 30 for substance, 20 for organization, 20 for refuting. There was no refuting done because they didn't give him a chance to do so. And delivery and civility and accessibility, I think in terms of delivery, I think Holness was more impressive. But I think just in terms of substance, Golden is right. They have been attacked. So it's not a big differential in score. I will give 7.6 to Holness, and I'll give 7.8 to Golden. I think Golden missed a perfect opportunity to really go hard in this. Really go hard. Drew Ross, what was your scoring? So I know you're in the chat still. What was your scoring? By the way, people, I don't have a skin in the game. I am not PMP. I am not JLP. I'm not affiliated with any party. Never have been. Not going to be so. I just call it like I see it. But on the integrity question, I did do a couple shows on it, and I am very familiar with it. Let's go to question 2, and I hear from Drew Ross. You get the one to go on. Okay.
Mr. Golding, Keith Duncan says the PNP's proposal to increase the income tax threshold to 3.5 million is impractical and impossible to fund without new taxes. Can you explain how these planned tax breaks will work without hurting the economy?
The context in which we have decided to increase the threshold to 3.5 million is the hollowing out of the middle class in this country. Working families finding it extremely difficult to make ends meet. And we believe with the debt to GDP ratio having now, after 13 and a half years of belt tightening and austerity, having now reached the cusp of the target of 60% of GDP introduced into the fiscal rules in law under Portia Simpson Miller, this is a time, this year it's expected to actually, with the readjustment of the definition and calculation of GDP, this is the year that we expect to achieve that target. That will release 2.5% to 3% of GDP of additional resources, which were not previously budgeted for in the fiscal policy paper. That is more than sufficient to pay for our entire program, including the $3.5 million increase to 3.5 million of the tax threshold, which will make our civil servants and our middle managers, and indeed most of Jamaicans who are presently suffering under the high burden of the cost of living, have money that they can spend, they can fix up their homes, extend their homes with a room, buy a car if they don't have one, pay down debt where they may be in arrears. It is necessary to preserve the country from brain drain and to keep the society intact.
Dr. Holness now has the opportunity to respond.
The hollowing out of the middle class is an act of the PNP. They totally decimated the middle class. It is a Jamaica Labour Party that introduced the increase in the non-tax threshold that recreated a middle class in Jamaica. In fact, when you look at the salary profile of PAYE contributors, you would see that their salaries have all risen. It is a Jamaica Labour Party through the compensation review that has increased salaries by over 200 billion Jamaican dollars for public sector workers. The current proposal of the PNP is unworkable. With an expert forensic auditor, the findings of that report have suggested no corruption. There have been no charges. Every aspect of my report, every aspect of my personal life and my personal financial details are in the public domain. I am the politician about which Jamaica knows the most. And therefore, I am the politician who can stand with the greatest moral authority to treat with any matter that is considered corrupt, as I have done in the past. And I want to give this assurance to the Jamaican people that you know me, you know about me, you can trust me, and you know that I stand against corruption.
Mr. Golding has the.
So I think something happened here in the video, actually. It looked like it skipped. Because the second question was about Golding need to substantiate how he's going to pay for increasing the minimum wage, right? He mentioned 3.5% of GDP to be utilized. And neither of them were great in this. So I thought Holness would have pushed back and said, which I think he did. So something happened in this video, because I didn't watch it. There are two things. One is, if you're going to pay for it with 3.5% of GDP, what Holness should have said, actually, to me, was they have brought the debt to equity rate, the debt to GDP down to 60%. The US probably is about 130% of GDP, which is like twice. So Jamaica is 2 times better when it comes to GDP versus debt, which means how much goods and services you produce in a given year, your debt is 60% of that, versus the US where it's 130%. So you have more debt in the US than you have GDP producing in a given year, which is a great number for Jamaica. Holness should have took credit for that. So I didn't hear him do. What he talked about was go back how many years when Golding wasn't prime minister, wasn't the prime minister then, and said they decimated the middle class. He's making a point to say from way back when to now, they've been the better part. I'm not sure what happened in the video, but it skipped. But in Golding's perspective, in terms of what he said, he's able to articulate how that 3.5%, which is additional growth they're getting, is going to pay for his benefits he's providing. What wasn't said also is that this is, and I think it came out later, this is a zero-sum game. If you make more revenues, you may have other expenses that you have to pay for. So you may not have the flexibility to utilize that additional 3.5% of GDP, the gross domestic product, to subsidize the benefit you want to give to those who are at a certain income level to enable them to improve their condition. So I don't think either of them was great. I probably would grade them even on that score because I don't think Golding was great. And I don't think what he said was addressed directly by the Prime Minister. So I'm going to give both of them a 7 in this case. Drew Ross, you have a grade? But as I said before, something happened to the video because it skipped and went to the question that ties into his financial situation. Let me see what else comes from this. Because the Prime Minister first spoke, and then it went to, let me go back, and then it went to Golding. Let me go so we can find it. Okay.
Created a middle class in Jamaica. In fact, when you look at the salary profile of PAYE contributors, you would see that their salaries have all risen. It is a Jamaica Labour Party through the compensation review that has increased salaries by over 200 billion Jamaican dollars for public sector workers. The current proposal of the PNP is unworkable. With an expert forensic auditor, the findings of that report have suggested no corruption. There have been no charges. Every aspect of my report, every aspect of my personal life and my personal financial details are in the public domain. I am the politician about which Jamaica knows the most. And therefore, I am the politician who can stand with the greatest moral authority to treat with any matter that is considered corrupt, as I have done in the past. And I want to give this assurance to the Jamaican people that you know me, you know about me, you can trust me, and you know that I stand against corruption.
So this was a question about corruption, right? And this was the Holness response. They hear what Golding has to say. I think somehow the question didn't come out.
Mr. Golding has the opportunity to respond to that social media question as well. Within
Andrew,
so the social media question was, there seems to be apathy in voting, and part of the reason people don't vote because they view both parties as being sort of corrupt in a sense. And the Prime Minister's response was that he's been audited by forensic auditors. He has nothing to hide. Everybody knows the situation, and he's been cleared. Now let's hear Golden response, and I provide my perspective.
What I know about you is that you have 28 bank accounts, that you received several $1 million in cash deposits from anonymous donors in your bank account, that your companies had transactions of over $400 million, several thousand transactions between them, and that Positive Jamaica Foundation, a non-profit which you are intimately connected with, provided resources which you use for personal investments through your personal company. We have signed the Leadership Code of Conduct developed by Integrity Commission. All of our spokespersons and myself have signed. None of your people have signed it. I am committed to ensuring that all members of the executive, when we form government, will have their Integrity Commission declarations published, not just the leader of the opposition and what should happen, but hasn't happened in your case because you're not certified, the Prime Minister. So the whole question that has been asked is an excellent question. And we really need to step up our vigilance against corrupt behavior, nepotism and cronyism. The volume of scandals under this Jamaica Labour Party government is unprecedented. Over the number of ministers who have had to be removed from frontline duty, many of them parked in the naughty corner in OPM rather than being sacked. It is a disgrace to the country, and your personal situation where you're operating under a deep cloud because your Integrity Commission declarations are not certified also is something which Jamaica cannot go forward with.
We'll now take a short break, and we invite you to stay tuned.
So on that last point around corruption and Holness response and the rebuttal by the opposition, I don't think that was close. First of all, the Prime Minister is not right. He has not been cleared. He has gone through the courts to try to throw out certain things. He has challenged the Integrity Commission. He has criticized them. He has pushed back really hard on delivery of just the information in a process whereby it's agreed that all the politicians need to have their assets certified every year. And he has not been the most cooperative person. In fact, some information took a while to be done. It's been going on for a while now. It has not been resolved. And he has not been convincing with his answer. As you hear, the opposition says, it's not only him, there's about 10 people in his party. And when some individuals, one of the individuals, he was moved to be in the Prime Minister's office because of his situation. So the Prime Minister has been, to be frank, disingenuous when he said he has been cleared and he's been ordered cleared, because that's not been the case. There's a challenge around $400 million movement of money. They're challenged around 28 bank accounts. There are so many issues there. The challenge about the house in Beverly Hills, and it was not in conformity with the coding and building guidelines. There are so many things there which I thought Golden could have done a better job of pushing to, but he did bring, and Golden seemed to use more euphemism than, he wouldn't say you're a lie or XYZ. He may say it was an integrity issue, or you're not being totally transparent, which is more mild way of putting it, but the Prime Minister does go on the attack. So I don't think this one is even close on the whole, and he'll have a chance to rebut when it comes to sort of corruption, because he'll mention at a later point in the program the old FinSac situation. But I thought it was a 9-6 scoring for that one, actually. Now, I know they're going to break, so let's see what comes next.
Welcome back to the Leaders Debate presented by the Jamaica Debates Commission. We invite you, the public, to send us your questions via direct message on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok to Jamaica Debates. We now ask Dion Jackson Miller to start this segment with a question for Mr. Mark Golding.
Going back to the income tax proposal, Mr. Golding, because several people have been taking issue with your numbers. The PNP's assertion that it can fund the proposal through projected revenue growth doesn't seem to take into, as well as organic revenue growth, doesn't seem to take into account increase in expenditure. That's also projected, as well as low growth rates that no government in recent years has managed to overcome. Isn't it true that your numbers just don't add up?
The fiscal policy paper does project over the next 3 years some $160 billion of additional revenue. The degree to which there are accompanying expenses will depend on how we manage the expense side of the budget. There's also the fact that there are $360 billion of programs in the budget that represent the priorities of a given government at a particular point in time. When we are elected, we're not going to be elected to maintain the current trajectory that Jamaica is on. People want to see change. And most fundamentally, the issue really is the fact that we are coming to the end of the period of austerity, the period where Jamaica has been for 13 and a half years, steadfastly paying down debt, so that the debt to GDP ratio, which we inherited at 147% of GDP at the beginning of 2012, is now, in this fiscal year, projected to achieve the target of 60% of GDP. Once that happens, we no longer have to reduce debt as a priority. We just have to maintain that debt profile. That will release resources of 2.5% to 3% of GDP, which is close to $90 billion of additional resources, which no longer have to be part of your primary surplus target. So we will be able to fund our program quite comfortably come April next year, when the fiscal year starts.
Dr. Holness,
there is a song which says, when the rum tells you you're a big dancer. I don't know what the leader of the opposition was drinking. Firstly, the debt to GDP for this fiscal year is not projected to be 60%. It is projected to be 65% thereabouts. If the leader of the opposition is depending on growth to provide the revenues for $75 billion of expenditure, the country would have to grow between 8 and 10%, which has not done that since the 60s. Thirdly, yes, there are $300 billion of programs. What are these programs? Pharmaceuticals.
Thank you, Dr. Holness. Thank you, Dr. Holness. Our next question is from Giovanni Dennis.
So that was a follow-up to the previous question, right? So you have to grade them almost in combination, previous answer. So what Golden is saying is that because GDP is going to grow, you can take that extra percentage of monies from GDP, what it translates in terms of revenues, and subsidize program to uplift the income level or for people in the lower echelon of society. What Holness is saying is that that doesn't really work like that, right? The number you gave of 60% is not the number. Debt to GDP is going to be 65%. I think Mark would probably dispute that. But also, I'll just say this. The reason why debt to GDP is important, because your debt carries an interest rate to it, an interest payment to it. So the higher the debt you pay, you're going to be paying interest, significant interest, depending on what rate you get those debt were issued at. So say you're paying 7-8% on 100 billion, you're paying $8 billion every single year on that debt. That's money that could be used for other things if your debt is lower. If you lower your debt by 10 billion, you're going to put 7% of that 10 billion number to be a lower number, right? You won't pay that 7% of that 10 billion if you lower it by 10. So that's very, very important, actually, when we think about the debt to GDP ratio. And Jamaica should be proud that it's moving in the right direction of debt to GDP. As I said, the US is probably, I think it's about 130%. You hear him mention before that Jamaica was 140%. That means interest is killing you and killing the country. So to cut that over in half over the last, say, 15, 20 years is a significant achievement. Maybe more than 15 years, probably. But since they started trying to reduce in the PMP administration to now, significant achievement.
Yes, and it goes to Dr. Holness.
Dr. Holness, you said on February 7, 2016 in Sam Sharp Square, Montego Bay, within our first 100 days in government, we will start the legislative process to fix the general election date in Jamaica. It's been 3,490 days since. In your May 2016 budget debate, you further stated the country should not be distracted by protracted periods of uncertainty. Yet, that's exactly what happened with this year's election. After 2 consecutive terms in office, you have failed to deliver on this promise. Why?
Your research into this matter, I respect the question, is incomplete. At the calling of the 2020 general elections, I explained to the public in Parliament that our government actually started work on fixed election date, and we found that it was inconsistent with our constitutional arrangements. And therefore, we did not include it in our 2020 manifesto. It is no longer a part of our platform. More to that, however, is the fact that in seeking to have all of these previous considerations included, we went about putting in place a constitutional reform commission that would bring all the considerations for constitutional reform under an expert review. That expert review was thwarted by the opposition. So, yes, these considerations were considered from 2016, but the reality of our constitutional arrangement made us take a different route, which is to go to a comprehensive constitutional reform, which was frustrated by the opposition.
Over to Mr. Golding to respond.
Just before I respond, just to point out that Mr. Holness's data is not current. The Fiscal Commissioner issued a release, I think it was today actually, indicating that with the National System of Accounts being updated, GDP has been adjusted, and we're now at 62% of GDP. That's what the debt is at the end of March this year, and we will more than likely achieve 60% this fiscal year. No, please, you're not entitled to do that. The flip-flopping from the Prime Minister is manifest. They were supposed to have impeachment. There's no impeachment. Fixed election day, no fixed election day. Ring fencing the NHT, they have taken over $130 billion out of the NHT. Cannot be trusted.
Just reminding that there is a format to the debate and asking the debaters to respect the format to which they have agreed. It's now time to go to the next.
So what's your grading, Drew Ross, or anyone else, on that last question, where there are certain election dates that should have been put in place in terms of how the election process work, have dates which are much more defined, and the Prime Minister, the questioner, Dennis, mentioned that this has been 3,000, that's 10 years, people. If it's 3,000 days, that's about 10 years. And the Prime Minister is saying, going back to 20, he went back to 2020, which is only 5 years ago, right? This party has been in power for 13 years. So it looked like he doesn't have a place to stand on something which he said 2020, all these things happened and they postpone, when it's been 3,000 days, which has been well reviewed by the questioner to say, you had all this time to do it and you can put it off? And you skip a whole half of that time to come with an excuse where you couldn't do it. And you actually are making constitution reform even during your tenure during that time period. I gave him a 5 on that. I thought he was poor in that one. I gave Golden an 8, who called him out. That was horrible. That was not pretty, actually. That was horrible on the Prime Minister's part. Sorry. Horrible. Let's keep going.
Question, social media. Amoy Harriet, over to you.
This question comes from Janai. Parliament has passed a constitutional amendment bill and a referendum bill to transition Jamaica into a republic. Could you clarify the economic and administrative implications of this transition and how you intend to ensure that the process doesn't distract from Jamaica's economic priorities like debt reduction, investment diversification, and public services?
That question goes to Mr. Golding first and then to Dr. Holness.
In answer to the question, we can whistle and ride. So we have done very well as a nation in reducing our public debt. We ensured that the fiscal rules were very strong with an algorithm, an equation in the fifth schedule to the Financial Administration Audit Act that determines the fiscal balance that must be hit by each year's budget, and that has ensured that successive governments have stayed on course to take it down to 60%. We can do constitutional reform.
I don't know what happened. It froze. I'm getting this hookup.
Critical issues. And we have achieved that consensus yet on the critical issue of decolonization, in particular our final court, which is now the Privy Council, the King's Court, that makes orders in the name of the King, as opposed to the regional court, which has been established, the Caribbean Court of Justice, which Jamaica helped to design, helped to fund, and which has developed over the last 20 years a reputation for independence and excellence. There are aspects of the bills that are in Parliament now that we have big problems with. In particular, the fact that effectively it will allow the Prime Minister to appoint the President, because a simple majority of both houses will do it if we do not agree who that person is. I think that is wrong. I think that the President of the country must command the trust and confidence of both sides of the political aisle and indeed the wider public.
Dr. Holness?
To be clear, the bills before Parliament do not give the Prime Minister the ability to appoint the President. We are the party that have advanced the greatest, the process of repatriating our sovereignty. I am a Jamaican through and through, and I want to see my country's sovereignty represented by a Jamaican. It puzzles me as to why the opposition is trying to frustrate this. The opposition says we must always consult the people, yet they do not want to consult the people on a fundamental architecture of our society, our final court of appeal. They are inconsistent, they are hypocritical, flip-floppers. They were the ones who nudged, encouraged, and agreed with the government that a process should be started for the repatriation of our sovereignty. Midway the process, they have turned around to say they have challenges with it. What is it that they really want? Are you truly a Jamaican?
It's time for our next question. It is from Dion Jacks Miller. And
That's an interesting one because, you know, the whole thing about Privy Council, you having self-determination, you making decisions about your country, not to go to England to resolve, especially the situation we had with one of the entertainers. That's an interesting one. But you notice 2 or 3 times in its rebuttal, the Prime Minister questioning the opposition leader about whether, to me, to be frank, whether he's a Jamaican or not. He keeps emphasizing that he's a Jamaican because we know the opposition leader had both dual citizenship, both British and Jamaican, even though he was born in Jamaica because his dad was British. And therefore, you don't have automatic citizenship, but you can file and get it. And I think he probably had it along with a British passport, without a Jamaica passport. Because frankly, a lot of us know, I mean, I want to admit it, it's hard to travel in Jamaica passport in certain countries. It's much easier than a British passport. That one was a little more difficult to figure out who came out on top. The Prime Minister was very, very forceful. I still don't know the nuances around this, which is is why is it that Golden is against the public making the decision, as the Prime Minister alluded to, because he didn't push back on it, versus what he's suggesting, which is he doesn't want the Prime Minister to elect the President if it becomes a republic, and Prime Minister, everybody gonna say that's not the case. So I have to leave that one open now in terms of how I score it, because not totally clear to me.
Goes to Mr. Golding.
Mr. Golding, the PNP is promising a tax break for small businesses for the first 3 years of formally incorporating, as well as a raft of other targeted tax relief measures. How do you respond to criticisms that your tax plan reintroduces inefficiencies, tax avoidance, and corruption into the tax system that have been eliminated over the past 15 years?
First of all, I think the Prime Minister repeated innuendo or direct attack which has been leveled by his party on my nationality. And, you know, I just wanted to just make it absolutely clear that I am indeed born here as a Jamaican. Here is my birth certificate, and it shows I was born at the University Hospital on July 19th, 1965, and it's right here. I hope your camera can pick it up. And I have a copy for you, Prime Minister, right here. And I wish you could provide me with a copy of your certification, but of course you can't do so. Now, on the question of tax, there's a third schedule to the GCT Act now, which has a long list of items which are not subject to GCT that are exempt. We feel that laptops and other devices are critical tools of trade, and it is wrong to tax them, and we are going to add them to that list. And similarly, sports equipment, which is vital for social cohesion. Sports is a critical part of keeping young people away from straying down the wrong path and so on. Why are we taxing those items? That cost of living is already high. So I don't agree. The system we have already caters for items which should not be taxed. And we're simply saying we want to adjust those items to include things that should be there but are not yet there.
Dr. Holness?
The Jamaica Labour Party is the only political organization to have reduced taxes. We reduced the GCT from 16.5% to 15%. And we have done so in a way that has not compromised our revenues or the sustainability of future programs. All, and I repeat, all the tax suggestions and promises of the opposition will compromise our fiscal arrangements and place us back in debt or result in increased taxes. The best way to provide social services is to identify the persons who need it.
Thank you, Dr. Holness. Our next question is from Giovanni Dennis, and it goes to Dr. Holness.
The Rio Cobre is a major water source for the St. Catherine Plains and communities in and around Spanish Town. Yet, since 2019, under your watch as Environment Minister, there have been close to a dozen chemical spills, causing fish kills and disrupting lives. You say you're a champion of the environment. Why hasn't there been tougher sanctions for the repeated breaches of environmental permits by the companies culpable?
The Jamaica Labour Party has put in very tough sanctions, including the requirement for the provision of bonds. We are the only government to have called these bonds and brought polluters to court. We have also started the process of studying the Rio Cobre to ensure that there is no discharge into the Rio Cobre. And this is something that I am personally very serious about, and we will put in legislation to end discharge into the Rio Cobre. It becomes even more important as we have now put in place the Content Rio Cobre water project, for which we are pulling 15 million gallons of water from the Rio Cobre per day. So we must protect that asset, and I give the public my sincere commitment that we will protect the Rio Cobre.
Mr. Golding?
Quickly, just to say that the JLP is not the only party to have reduced taxes. The PNP reduced the personal income tax rate from 33.33% to 25%. We reduced the GCT rate from 17.5% to 16%. There's been reductions of taxes on both sides. They plan to reduce, they say, income tax from 25 to 15, which is going to help the rich and the ministers who pay themselves 200+% pay increases. On the environmental issue, you are the one who overturned NEPA's decision not to grant a permit for the mining of the Dry Harbour Mountains, which is a very sensitive nature reserve. You're flip-flopping again, Andrew.
Our next question is from social.
Yeah, I don't think the Prime Minister did well on that question at all. So the interviewer asked him about the Rio Cobra River and penalizing individuals who obviously probably deposit chemicals in the river or do things which are not appropriate. And he's been in power since when? And say what they're going to do versus what they have done to preserve it, given how much water, clean water, is provided to those who utilize the river, right? Now, the opposition didn't directly focus on that. They went to something else that he didn't do. But I don't think the Prime Minister made himself look good by not really answering the question in a way which suggests. He said they have penalized companies, but he can't point to any specific company that they penalize. Because what you want to do in this case is provide evidence to substantiate your position. He's not able to do that. He didn't say, well, we penalize company A, B, and C. Here's how much we fine them. We are very vigilant. We focus on this. He said we are focused on it. I'm a promise going to do X, Y, Z, or I'm going to do it. You've been in power for 13 years. You should have done it. And I'm very surprised that Golden didn't jump on it and focus on that specific question versus going to some other component that informs this. So again, I think Golden did a better job than the Prime Minister in that case. Now, let me just say something, which is very important. I think, from where I sit, it's easier for the opposition, who's not been in power for 13 years, to find gaps and holes and areas which need to be addressed. Because the incumbent has been in power for 13 years. They can point to a lot of things they've done good, but there'll be a lot of things you can point to, especially in a developing country, which have not been done well. So I think it's probably easier because you don't have a lot to be criticized about, except how you operate in Parliament and your opposition to certain things, because you don't have tangible things that you have done. Now, at some point in this debate, it may swing somewhat where the party in power can point to what they have done. Unless you're a country like a Singapore, which back in the 60s was similar to Jamaica, and where they are now, they can point to a steady stream of improvement made over the years and show now you're a first world country coming from a third world country, or from a developing country to a first world country. It's kind of hard to do if you're not one of the countries that have a lot of resources. So I can understand why the Prime Minister is on the back foot a lot, but there's some things that they haven't done which are just clear that probably should have been done.
Social media, over to Amoy Harriot.
Well, Archie, Delanore says many Jamaicans would like to see the full rollout of body-worn cameras on our police officers, even more so now, given the increase in fatal police shootings. Will this be something that you'll prioritize should you be elected?
Mr. Golding will respond first.
First of all, I think it's very important to acknowledge and commend the excellent work done by the police force over the last year and a half in bringing the rate of violent crime, in particular murders in the country, down from the intolerable levels where it had been under this government. More murders committed in Andrew Holness's 2 years in office than any other 2-year term in the history of Jamaica. The police have finally abandoned the failed policies that we did our best to stop, the mass use of states of emergency, which the court has ruled as unconstitutional, and have gone now to a much more targeted approach, a much more strategically sound approach. Having said that, we do feel that it's very important that the public as a whole must have trust and confidence in the police, because the police rely on intelligence and information from the public. And therefore, if the public feel that there's excessive use of force and there's no accountability for it, they're not going to be as cooperative as we need them to be. I think, therefore, it's in the interest of the Jamaican society and the police themselves to have the benefit of body-worn cameras, especially when they go on special operations, so there can be no question, nobody can accuse them wrongly of having used excessive force when the force was legitimate as used. And to the extent that there may occasionally be an excessive use of force, the persons are held accountable for that in accordance with the law. That's what the rule of law requires.
Dr. Holness?
The government is already in the process of procuring and acquiring body-worn cameras. Several thousands of them are under procurement and will be deployed shortly to the police force. We consider this as absolutely important in giving confidence to the public regarding the actions of the police force, and the police themselves want to have these cameras as protection for themselves. Interestingly, however, the leader of the opposition states that the states of public emergency did not work. Now, murders under the PNP increased to over 1,000 murders in 1997 and remained there for over 30 years. It is the Jamaica Labour Party in 3 consecutive years that have reduced murders by 55%. The states of public emergency worked. The states of public emergency were supported by the PNP when Peter Phillips was the leader of the opposition, and it reduced murders by 27%. Since we did not have the cooperation of the opposition, murders went up. A question must be asked: who is responsible for the increase in murders when there was a tool that could have saved lives? It is a serious question.
So the question was about body cameras. Should the police be required to wear body cameras? I didn't hear the Prime Minister answer that. He focused on rebutting the opposition. Golden did say they should wear body cameras, but he went before to position this in terms of where crime was under Holness administration. So what you'd like first is for the person to answer the question, then provide the ancillary stuff they want to make a point. I will see on body cameras, if one was to think about it, which is, I don't agree with the Prime Minister. I don't think the police want to wear body cameras. They don't. Not in Jamaica. Not the way to go about doing their business. If you do a comparison between industrialized countries, third world countries, and police killings, and I'm not saying people are not violent, who may even put themselves in position to be in that situation, but it's horrible, actually. There's always somebody have a knife or a gun or something. The police always go for somebody and they don't return. And body cameras will show up what exactly transpired. And we know historically that's not been the case where things have been done the right way. Now, I would agree with the Prime Minister that it appears state of emergencies do have to reduce crime, even though it inconvenienced the public. But and he said, well, we have a lot of body cameras and they're going to be affected. We seem to have so many things, whether it's bus for school kids, whether it's body cameras, whether it's the real cover, that's going to be done. But it's hard to see you're going to do something when you've been in power so long, and body cameras have been around for a while, right? It's hard to say that. Now, he points out to the opposition and that crime under them was very, very high, which we totally agree. And it's only in the last few years that crime has come down quite a bit. But the Prime Minister also understands that he's been in power for 13 years. I think he mentioned, did he say 97 or 77? He said 30 years, the two don't connect. But as I said, when you're an incumbent, there's more to criticize. And sometimes you're the opposition. Sometimes you stay silent. It works in your favor if you have credibility. But if you're trying to build credibility, you have to be aggressive. I wouldn't give that to the Prime Minister.
No, Giovanni Dennis has indicated that he would like to ask one of his 2 follow-up questions. I believe that question will go to
Mr. Golding.
Mr. Golding.
Mr. Golding, I want to go back to the matter of your dual citizenship. It took days for you to confirm that you held dual citizenship and weeks for you to renounce it. Why didn't you acknowledge the issue upfront, and why should Jamaicans believe you will be forthcoming with them on any issue, even if it's uncomfortable in the first instance?
I didn't hesitate to acknowledge dual citizenship. I was born in Jamaica. I had a British father, and I inherited British citizenship by descent from him. And that's lawful under the laws of Jamaica, and indeed parliamentarians in Jamaica are permitted to be dual nationals. I therefore didn't consider it to be something which was problematic. However, when it was raised last year and politicized, I decided I want to know what the Jamaican people felt about it. because I thought really my response ought to be driven by them. We did an internal poll. It showed that a majority thought I should renounce, and so I did. And I renounced my British citizenship in August last year.
Dr. Holness, rebuttal.
You know, this is a strange one. A man who wants to represent his country must choose his country. He doesn't need to ask anyone. You should choose. And that's why we say we choose Jamaica. It is indeed of concern that it was not until your 40s, when you were becoming a minister of government, that you sought to have a Jamaican passport. It is not your birth that makes you Jamaican. It is the choices you make for your country, including supporting a process that would make a Jamaican head of state here, including getting a Jamaican passport.
I think both sides, I don't think Golden answered the question too well, given what we know, the big brouhaha about his citizenship. To me, there's nothing wrong with dual citizenship. I have triple citizenship, frankly. Andre Blake have dual citizenship. He's Jamaican, he plays for Jamaica, he has dual citizenship. He was very proud of it. If your parents are British, and my niece and nephew, I got them British citizenship, even though they were born in Jamaica, because it allowed them to travel, have more access to travel to different countries, or to even come to the States to visit when it's not easy in Jamaica. So in essence, what Holness says was that it's not that you're born, because somebody texted me and said he said something different actually. He basically said, it's not that you're born in Jamaica, it's almost like where your heart is in a sense. Now, if I am, and we should say this, Holness's mentor was Siaga, right? Siaga was born in Boston. Let's be frank. He was born in Boston. And people say he was compromised with America. He was born in Boston. He was one of your mentors. So to say, as if you're casting aspersion on somebody because they have another, they have the flexibility in terms of having another citizenship so they can utilize that for different purposes. I don't think that's fair. He was born in Jamaica. He's trying to become Jamaican Prime Minister. He's obviously Jamaican, right? So what you do is casting aspersion in people's eyes, and his persuasion also is part of that whole equation. People may not want to admit that, but I'm gonna bring it up. So between him being British, quote unquote, as you want to put it, even though he's born in Jamaica, because his father was British, and his persuasion, coupled with that, you're casting aspersion on him, which I don't think is fair, actually. Because if he's trying to run for Prime Minister, he's born in Jamaica, he's a Jamaican. He has dual citizenship. It happens. Get over it. Now, the Prime Minister is very focused on this, and I'm not sure why it's such a big issue if he's a Jamaican citizen trying to become Prime Minister because he has citizenship in another country. Now, some countries require you to give up your, I think India does, some of these countries require you to give up your citizenship and be just subservient to that country, but people still maintain dual and triple citizenship. So I didn't get that.
Our next question is from social media. Over to Amoy, and that question will go to Mr. Golding.
On TikTok, Taj says, given the current negotiations surrounding the U.S. Keep Call Centers in America Act and its potential to impact over 50,000 Jamaican BPO workers, how does your administration plan to safeguard both employment and livelihoods for young Jamaicans if outsourcing opportunities decline?
Now, that's so now I'm into this, right? Because I think people haven't gone into these questions they should in terms of what's substantive. The economy is an imperative. And people ask the question, the world is changing materially. I think the moderators missed some questions I should have asked. This question is an important question. If 50,000 people are employed in a certain discipline, and it may change materially, where are they going to go? And in fact, call centers don't even pay that much.
That's a good question. And the truth is that the evolution of technology, especially the advent of artificial intelligence, is also a threat to the type of services that are provided through outsourcing. So we are going to have to ensure that we try and upskill our existing workforce so that they can be trained to do the type of tasks that technology isn't going to be as adept at dealing with as human beings. And we also have to provide other avenues for employment for young people. That's why we're going to establish the Youth Innovation Fund, which will provide grants and loans to young people to get them into business if they want to get into business. And it will enable them to pursue their talents in tech or in creative industries or any other area of endeavor so that they can express themselves, help to monetize their talent and build brand Jamaica. And so those are the types of things that need to be done. We also want to emphasize training and the role of the private sector in training. We'll be giving an incentive, a dollar-for-dollar matching of all businesses who invest in upskilling and training. We will match their investment through the HEART program to encourage them to invest further in training and upskilling the workforce so they can employ more people in higher paying jobs. Right now, too many of our people are struggling in low income jobs, low wage jobs, low tech jobs.
The same question goes to Dr. Holness.
Well, let me give you some practical and real answers instead of airy-fairy stuff. Jamaica is already positioning itself for nearshoring and friendly shoring of the recalibration of the global supply chain. And that is why we have made a massive investment in the Caymanas development and in Raintree. These are real investments that will bring production to Jamaica and jobs to Jamaica. We have already started to ensure that over 120,000 Jamaican youths can access training free of cost under HEART. And much of that training is in support of not just BPO, but logistics. But more than that, we saw the change in technology coming and the impact it would have. And that is why we have invested in a coding and technology academy, the Amber Heart Academy, where hundreds of Jamaican youth are trained in not just the basics, but as high up as data science. Because what we want to create in our society are the trained skills that can attract the jobs that we are already negotiating for. You have a government that understands the changing global dynamics.
Thank you, Dr.
And putting
Holness.
in place measures to take advantage of it.
I think Holness, what he said making sense, and that one that hands down, I think Golden didn't provide substantive thought about, given the change in the job environment, how you're going to address things going forward if countries decide to do more insourcing versus outsourcing. Outsourcing affects a lot of countries. Countries like India and financial services, significant impact on them. So when countries start to insource and you lose those opportunities, what do you turn to? Now, I know the Prime Minister is pushing on HEART. I know somebody who went through HEART. They didn't get no job after they went through HEART for 2 years. I was wasting my money trying to send them through HEART. So I don't know enough about it to be informed, but I know the practical experience I saw, and it wasn't that great. Also, part of the problem is these are not high-paying jobs. So people are still going to be at the bottom of the totem pole with some of these jobs we're talking about, because they're not uplifting them out of poverty. They're not lifting them to make them go to say middle class or upper middle class. That's not happening. What I'm disappointed in, especially from Golden, is not jumping even one more further ahead. We're in an AI environment where jobs are going to displace across the board, whether you want to or not, whether it's Jamaica or the US, wherever, jobs are going to displace middle management jobs, not just jobs in the lower echelon. In fact, the plumbers, the carpenters, the nurses may be much more job secured than people who are in finance, in administration, in clerical. They are much more at risk. Jobs which are repetitive in nature, where some AI agent can perform those jobs, will be displaced. So if you are the opposition, or if you're in power, you got to think about what's the next step. Now, the world is trying to figure it out, but Golden was thinking futuristically and visionary. He would have come with something which may seem pie in the sky, but it's practical, because you could give tangible example where jobs get displaced. I had a conversation with somebody I had in my previous workplace. We were just talking about this, and he's telling me what he's doing with AI. It is extremely disruptive, and countries like Jamaica are going to be materially affected if countries start taking away certain jobs and you don't have replacements. Another point, which I'm disappointed with, as it relates to the moderators, the questioners, and the debaters. Jamaica's economy is too dependent on the US. If the US sneeze or have a slight cold, Jamaica get pneumonia. Between tourism and remittances, that's what, 60 something, almost 70% of that economy. That's what we call concentration risk. That's not sustainable at some point. Now, I know Jamaica is having much more engagement with China, and China is spending more in the country and doing more there. But you have to diversify your economy. If you think about where can I allocate resource to materially change the composition to make up my GDP to allow me to be more competitive. It's not okay to maintain the status quo, as at some point, when your neighbor here, who's the US, decide to go in a certain path, you may be in trouble. They're going to tax remittances by 1% of remittances. They may think about dissuading people from tourists from going to Jamaica. What are you going to do then? It creates a lot of foreign exchange, but Jamaica have to make long-term visionary plans for diversifying its economy, so depending on any one source for generating revenues and generating GDP.
Welcome back to the Leaders Debate presented by the Jamaica Debates Commission. We invite you, the public, again, to send us your questions via direct message on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok to Jamaica Debates. We now ask...
And one other point. As this debate goes further, Holness is getting stronger. And you know why? Because we have someone moved away from what he's uncomfortable with, which is the whole corruption component, to more things which he has executed against and can talk to. So the promises that they've made, when questions coming up and they haven't been delivered, he's not comfortable. You can actually attack those, as I mentioned before, in terms of what you've done versus what you've done. Now he's in areas in which they're doing things, and he's much more comfortable, and that's coming forward.
Dion Jackson Miller to start this segment with a question for Dr. Andrew Holness.
2021, you were appointed to the Queen's Privy Council and the Ancient Advisory Body, and your administration's recent attempt at constitutional reform would have seen the removal of the British monarch from Jamaica's parliament and executive in phase 1, but not from our judiciary. Opposition or no opposition, referendum or not, can you tell us your position, whether you support the removal of the Privy Council as Jamaica's final court, and if so, when?
My position is that Jamaica should have its own local court as its final appellate court. But I also do respect the Caribbean Court of Justice, of which we are a part of its original jurisdiction. I will say, however, that on a matter as important as this, that forms the architecture of our nation, the people must be consulted. And that is why I put in place a process that would begin these consultations in a practical and phased basis, a process which has been thwarted by the opposition. Now, the leader of the opposition raises questions about democracy. On one hand, he does not want to consult. He wants the government to just act without consulting with the people, but then turns around and says that we are the ones undermining democracy. The leader of the opposition must be consistent. Democracy requires us to consult the people on these critical matters.
Mr. Golding?
Yes, Mr. Holness, shortly before the visit of Prince William to Jamaica, became a member of the King's Privy Council. So one has to wonder how he was choosing Jamaica when he did that. Anyway, to answer the question, we want to follow the Constitution, and the Constitution has been ruled by the Privy Council as the highest court as not requiring a referendum for the decision as to whether or not the CCJ should become the final court replacing the Privy Council. And that is what we think ought to be done. No other country that has moved away from the Privy Council has had a referendum to do so, and there are good reasons for that.
Our next question is from Giovanni.
Yeah, I find that strange. Like we're dealing with some colonial country and their king and Privy Council. and the Constitution allows us to do it, why are we going to go to, I agree in democracy, but that should be like carte blanche. You're just like, you know what, we're just going to do this. We are a self-determinant country. We're a sovereign country. We don't need no Privy Council. We should be doing our own thing. I don't understand why, if Golden is saying we should just get it done because the Constitution allow it, a lot of things you should go to the people for. I don't think that's one of them. Why would we want to have a Privy Council? I don't understand that, actually. I don't.
Annie Dennis, and it goes to Mr. Golding.
Mr. Golding, the PNP under your leadership has flip-flopped on a number of issues. For example, Julian Robinson on May 16, 2023, said the opposition takes no issue with the massive salary increase for parliamentarians. The very next day, the PNP released a statement objecting to the increase. Why should Jamaicans trust that you won't similarly make about turns on promises you are making now?
When Julian said that in Parliament, he was referring to the principle of parliamentarians getting an increase. He wasn't addressing the specifics of what was being proposed. We hadn't had a discussion around those specifics. When we looked at the details and we saw the massive increase that the Prime Minister was proposing for himself and for his ministers, we felt it was unconscionable to do that in the context where the public sector workers had just had their salary negotiations under some duress in relation to the teachers in particular, finalized, and many of them were getting 20% over 2 years. That is why we had to clarify our position, because it was not in accordance with what we thought that principle demanded. Now, over time, thinking can evolve. People change their positions on issues. So, for example, we are looking at this whole question of the 3.5 salary, the $3.5 million threshold increase. And we've seen where, as the debt target is achieved and resources can be released, it can be afforded. We weren't calling for 3.5 2 years ago, but we see that the need, inflation, etc., have happened. Cost of living pressures are there. Our evolution, our thinking has evolved, and we think that this is the right thing to do now, and we're committing ourselves to it. So, you know, I don't think the criticism is justified.
Thank you, Mr. Golding. Dr. Holness now has...
I have to call out that the leader of the opposition is telling lies. Julian Robinson stood in Parliament and said he supported the increase. Clear, and the tapes are there. Secondly, he calls the increase unconscionable, yet he takes it. I, Andrew Michael Holness, did not take it. The option was available to him as well. I chose not to take it. The leader of the opposition says, I have 28 bank accounts. That is absolutely not true. The report of the Integrity Commission includes accounts that are closed, accounts that are dormant, insurance accounts, and investment accounts.
Thank you.
So a couple of things. I would agree with the Prime Minister that it was unequivocal that PNP initially in Parliament supported the increase. And I guess when they got together and realized the implication of it and how big it was and the political implication, they pivoted. So yes, the opposition is right. You can change when circumstances change, but that was the next day. So I don't know how you change that quickly. They probably misspoke or didn't convene before responding. And you know, the concept was that there's brain drain in those areas, in certain areas, which require significant increase to retain some of those individuals, which makes sense. What people couldn't digest was the size of the increase. If I was Golden, when the Prime Minister says that he didn't take it, I would say, of course you don't need to take it. You got 28 bank accounts and $40 million running here and there. He missed an opportunity to go back at him. But I would also say for the Prime Minister that he had 28 bank accounts. And the accounts were closed. They were closed when he was told about them because they were open. Yes, some of them may have been dormant. They were with family members, like I think his parents, whatever. But he did have 28. Now, were the 28 all active, where transactions are going in and out? No, but he did have 28 bank accounts. To say you didn't have them and put no qualification around it and put no caveat around it, that's not true. You had 28. In fact, I think you had more than 28 bank accounts. I think some of those accounts you have in some of those commingled vehicles could be attributed to you, even though specifically you weren't the one controlling them. If you go back and check some of the situations they had some of the organizations that they had, some of the companies that they had, and 3 of those companies, one was a marketing company and another. If you go back, I did a show on this maybe a number of months ago. You had a lot of accounts, right? So in both cases, this is almost like a tie, where the opposition is not necessarily telling the truth as it relates to how they responded to the increase, and the Prime Minister trying to go back to the whole corruption situation, making statements which are also not true. And then he called Golden a liar more than once in this debate. So he attacks, right, which gives him a lot of credibility. Because it's very, and I said to somebody the other day, somebody yesterday, this morning, which is this. When you're in this situation, Jamaicans love people who are aggressive. So this would play well with certain areas of the constituent. If you're passive, even though you are a statement like Golden, it may not resonate as well, right? It may not well. So Holness, yeah, I agree to Drew Ross. Holness won this one, but if you know the history of his financial situation, he's not telling the truth. He came across much better because the question wasn't about his finances. It was about the flip-flop of the opposition, and they flipped and flopped.
They have
Thank you,
weaponized
Dr. Holness. Our next question is from Dion Jackson Miller, and it goes to Dr. Holness.
Dr. Holness, in your 2016 manifesto, you said, quote, will make it mandatory that the appointment to sensitive posts be approved by a 2/3 majority in each House of Parliament, thereby requiring consensus between government and opposition. Now, the posts identified included the Office of Director of Public Prosecutions. Not only did you not implement this, but you disregarded the opposition's objections in the case of the recent extension, which led to a court case. Wasn't this a betrayal of the principle of bipartisanship that you had been proposing 9 years before?
Absolutely not. And indeed, in some instances, there are parliamentary review of sensitive positions. And I want to be also very clear that the constitutional reform process that we have put in place would take into consideration all of these proposals that were made. We cannot tinker with the Constitution, doing a little thing here and a little thing there, and therefore we decided to put it in a comprehensive process, again, which the opposition has thwarted. But since I have some time, let me also address some other issues about the leader of the opposition. In my own Integrity Commission report published in Parliament, there were no findings of corruption. All my assets are in Jamaica, and I have declared everything to the Integrity Commission. The leader of the opposition, however, also had a report from the Contractor General previously, which found that they benefited from public resources in an irregular way. They termed it a sweetheart deal. In my report, there is no such thing. None of my resources are ever connected to any public funds or any public resources. However, for the leader of the opposition, the report was very clear that their operations were considered to be irregular and a sweetheart.
Thank you, Dr. Holness. Mr. Golding has an opportunity to respond.
The Prime Minister has no interest in bipartisanship. He has strong dictatorial tendencies and really would prefer not to consult with the opposition at all if he didn't have to. And I say that based on my experience with him over the last 5 years. He talks about he didn't want to tinker with the Constitution. Then why did he seek to amend the Constitution as a one-off, tabling the bill and seeking to pass it on the same day to extend the DPP's tenure beyond what was constitutionally allowed? That was tinkering, Prime Minister, so come on. And in terms of Integrity Commission reports, my declarations have been certified every year as being proper. Yours have not, because you are under investigation for illicit enrichment.
Mr. Golding.
So that one wasn't close. Two things around the engagement with the Prime Minister with the opposition, and is he dictatorial or not, in terms of the DPP. We know the DPP situation, what transpired, and her being able to extend her tenure when she should have, when her tenure was exhausted, and the process that didn't go through or was go through, right? That's first. Secondly, the Prime Minister is not being transparent. The Prime Minister's house initially was, which is in St. Lucia, to avoid Jamaica's taxes. I'm not sure why Golden doesn't bring this up. I'm bringing this up, people, because it's things I'm very familiar with, because I did do an assessment of it, right? The Prime Minister had a house in Beverly Hills where it was built in a way in which it was adhering to the housing code, and it was inspected 2 or 3 times. I have no idea who those auditors were, and they didn't find those violations. Very, very strange. You hear the opposition said, look, my assets have been certified, yours have not. For the Prime Minister to say in a public forum that he's been cleared, it is not true. He is not being cleared. This is still an ongoing process. We don't know if it's going to be cleared or not, but you can't make this definitive statement when the facts doesn't back it up. So I would give this one to Golden.
Our follow-up question now, Dion Jackson-Miller has indicated she'd like to use the first of her follow-up questions.
On the same issue of the DPP's appointment, Principal Dr. Holness doesn't require constitutional amendments, though. And if it is that you were committed to the principle of bipartisanship, why would you have rejected such strongly worded opposition coming from the opposition leader?
At the end of the day, this matter was taken to the court, and the courts decided, and the DPP was reinstated. I want to also clarify something.
Because you know that Jackson, she's a lawyer too, right? Dion's a lawyer too. He said you need constitutional change. She's saying no, that's not how it works. It's budget principle versus something that requires it. So she's calling him out, even though she hasn't said so that explicitly say, you know what, you're wrong or you're lying.
That the leader of the opposition said. The investigations carried out by the Integrity Commission are at an end. I am not currently under any investigation. There were no findings of corruption or charges. The leader of the opposition continues to try to weaponize these things because that is the only crutch he has to stand on. I, Andrew Holness, am thoroughly transparent.
Thank you, Dr. Holness. Thank you, Dr. Holness.
Here's the problem I have with that, people. The report has not been published. So how would we know? And how would the opposition know? Or how would the Prime Minister know? Unless he's had discourse. Because remember, the Integrity Commission referred the investigation to go to, refer the result of their review to be followed up to be investigated, because they couldn't account for certain assets. The 400 million that's moving back and forth, certain relationships they couldn't account for or couldn't decipher. Probably could, but didn't want to go that route. So when he come out definitively and said these things, from what I know, that's not the case.
Mr. Golding has the opportunity to respond.
Again, Andrew Holness is being disingenuous and tricky.
So he used the word disingenuous and to call him a liar, right? We talk about debating and not going to somebody personal, keeping above that. But Andrew is talking to his constituent or the people he wants to talk to. When you're in this debate, you're talking to like about 3 sets of people. Those in the upper echelon society, those in middle class, and those in the lower echelon. Those who are not with a lot of resources per se. You have to reach all that audience in how you communicate. Andrew does a better job, and in terms of doing so, he knows who he wants to reach. He wants to reach the majority. He doesn't care about a certain segment. He wants to reach the majority, and he's doing that. Golden is trying to be Mr. Professional, Mr. Statement, and maybe it's part of his DNA. And sometimes it doesn't come across as it should because he's not attacking like he should. And being stated sometimes, even though it's a debate, and one should be that way, doesn't work. You have to challenge the person who you're debating.
The Integrity Commission referred his matters to the Financial Investigations Division, a law enforcement agency charged with investigating serious financial crimes, for further investigation. What was his response? When there was a vacancy at the head of it, he sought to appoint or influence the appointment of somebody who is his close personal friend and who had said publicly on nationwide radio that he didn't see anything wrong in the report on Mr. Holness's financial situation, the Integrity Commission's report.
So this is where what Golden is saying is that the person who's going to head up the FID, who's Dennis Strong, who was part of the JFF, He's saying he's a friend of Holness, and he was appointed by the current administration. So therefore, there's a conflict of interest, and therefore he doesn't have any confidence that the ultimate outcome of the review will be negative because of who was appointed, who's going to run, right? It's my understanding, based on my knowledge of this, that in a lot of instances, the person who heads up the organization doesn't really run the investigation, but they have a say in the ultimately what's published, right? And for Drew Ross to say, well, Golden say his data is not clear. No, he's disputing it. He's saying, here's the clear. Golden is saying he's actually been certified, Drew Ross. He's saying the premise has not been certified. That means it's not clear. The Integrity Commission has to certify your assets, meaning they can substantiate that your assets were achieved legitimately. They have not done so for Golden. I'm sorry, for Holness, sorry.
Report. It was clearly a set-up job, and we feel that very strongly that this needs to be addressed.
Thank you, Mr. Golding. Our next question is from social media. I'm going to hand over to Amoy.
Malik on Facebook says, many Jamaicans feel the economic growth that's been reported hasn't lowered their grocery bills or electricity costs. How do you measure economic success beyond the statistics?
Dr. Holness has the opportunity.
Now, listen to the question and people listen to the answer. The person asked to say, you may tell me all the economic numbers are great, but I can't pay my bills. And don't tell me about statistics. I don't want to hear that. I want to hear how I can pay my bills. Please listen to the question and the answer. That's very important.
Opportunity to respond.
The first measure is income. And 280,000 jobs have been created in Jamaica, which means that more Jamaicans have income. There is a rise in income. Let's look at the minimum wage. The Jamaica Labour Party government has tripled the minimum wage. So there are more Jamaicans earning more at the lower levels of our country. Further, access to basic amenities. 350,000 Jamaicans have access to potable water, and in our next term, we will ensure that the 900,000 Jamaicans which now don't have reliable or full access to water will have access to water. Transportation, public transportation. We have done an amazing job in reducing bus fares and increasing the convenience and efficiency of public transportation, including implementing a rural bus fare system. On electricity, we have reduced the GCT on electricity, a promise made by the previous government and not kept. We have done it in a sustainable way. But more importantly, we have not placed any new taxes on the people of Jamaica since our government has been managing the fiscal affairs of this country.
Mr. Golding has an opportunity to respond.
First of all, I think the question is sound because statistics don't tell the full picture. Jamaica's competitiveness has been falling, yet they say that we have record low unemployment. Several 100,000 Jamaicans are outside the labour force and are not measured for that purpose. And indeed, you're regarded as being employed if you're employed 1 hour a week. 55% of Jamaicans are suffering from food insecurity. That is what the United Nations says, the FAO, which is an agency of the UN, says. 55% of Jamaicans are not getting adequate nutrition. That is not consistent with prosperity or low poverty rates or low unemployment rates. As for transportation costs, those are extremely high for many Jamaicans, which is why we want to introduce the RIDE program, a subsidy for rural children to help them to get to school in an affordable way. It's $10,000 per child who needs it in each family. So if you have more than one child, each one of them would qualify for this, because we recognize that that is one of the causes of absenteeism in schools at the moment. As for electricity, the rate and cost of electricity under this government has gone way higher than where we left it at 23 cents per kilowatt hour. Now it's over 40. And as for the GCT, they are providing a subsidy at the moment, but they haven't said for how long, and there's no commitment to keep it on.
Thank you, Mr. Golding. Welcome back to the final segment of the Leaders' Debate.
So I have to take 1 second break without opening this door. Don't leave me, but I'll come back to this question. Give me 1 second. All right, people, I apologize for that. I had to go open this door. Let me just say something on that point a while ago. The question was, I can't pay my bills. I cannot pay my bills. Don't give me no statistics and tell me how the statistics work, so I can pay my bills. The Prime Minister quoted a bunch of statistics and talked about some programs that they're putting in place. And he mentioned the rise in income. So let's say I make $10 and it goes up to $12, but my grocery bill goes from $7 to $12. That means I have no money in my pocket, right? What persons want is more tangible, easy understood communication that, you know what? I'm going to improve your financial condition, your situation. We're going to keep costs down. We're going to increase your income and allow you to have more disposable income to allow you to pay your grocery bills and whatever you need to do, and increase and improve your financial situation. That is clear. I'm not sure that Holness truly addressed that. Yeah, he mentioned some good things, transportation costs going down, some things that they're doing. But then he also mentioned things like, 900,000 Jamaicans don't have water. This is 2025. What? If I was him, I wouldn't mention that. We have 300,000 and 900,000 don't have water, portable water in this era, in this age, in this time. That's not a good thing. You've been in power for 13 years. Why didn't you figure that out then? Now, for the opposition, I'm not sure he also came up with clear-cut solutions for the problem. He talks to where the people are, and nutrition sometimes is by choice. I choose to. So sometimes the more expensive food are more nutritious, but sometimes by choice. Now, for poorer people, like in most countries, they're going to buy foods which are less costly, which are also never good for you health-wise, but some of it's by choice. So in this case, I don't think Holness did the best job. And also, I think Golden could have done a better job of really thinking about how we can improve people's living condition.
Presented by the Jamaica Debates Commission. We invite you, the public, to send us your questions via direct message on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok to Jamaica Debates. Now, this segment actually begins with a follow-up question. Giovanni Dennis has indicated that he'd like to ask one of his follow-up questions, and that goes to Dr. Andrew Holness.
Dr. Holness, on the matter of your government's hostility towards accountability institutions, in a world where journalists reporting on the conflict in Gaza are being murdered, the constant attacks on the press in Jamaica by both political parties undermine press freedom and has been reflected in Jamaica's slippage on the World Press Freedom Index. We have just seen the release of the names of journalists that both political parties objected to participating in the national debates. Why do both parties continue to undermine press freedom and put journalists in danger?
To be clear, my political party does not undermine press freedom. To be clear, my political party did not object. The objections came from the PNP. And historically, it is the PNP that has been vociferous, including attacking a particular radio station. I personally have stayed away from any negative commentary about any journalists. Journalists are important, and I support strong journalism. and I want to make that absolutely clear. In the time I have, I will rebut. I am in no way associated with the head of the FID. My understanding is that the head of the FID is a friend of the Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Dr. Holness. Mr. Golding has the opportunity to respond.
Press freedom is a fundamental pillar on which democracy is based, and I and my party fully support press freedom. The Prime Minister said something which was untrue when he said that only our side objected to some journalists. Their side also objected. In fact,
so I just want to stop to say this. You know that he used the word euphemism. He said untrue. Holness would say you're a liar or you tell lies. Untrue is less toxic than saying you're a liar. And that's where they differ in the approach and how they communicate.
We objected to 3, they objected to 4 journalists, and the matter was eventually resolved, and here we are. And the truth is that some journalists in the country are not as independent as others, are not as professional as others, and it is quite legitimate to criticize persons who you don't feel are living up to the standards of their profession. But we would never do anything to threaten or undermine press freedom, or indeed to make any journalist feel unsafe. And if it ever happens, we'll take out whatever it needs to stop it happening.
Thank you, Mr. Golding. Our next.
I think they're both not telling the truth. Now, the question was more an underline, basically to say, if you keep criticizing and calling off fiscal journalists in a country like Jamaica, where we know it's a boiling country, you're putting these people at risk. If you're saying they're undermining your party, and you know you're putting them at risk on both sides. And for the Prime Minister to come on and said what he said is unbelievable. There's two things to say. My party doesn't put people at risk, but say the way he's putting it, it's not, neither one of them come across well in this, because the inherent in the question is that what you're doing is put people at risk. The questioner wouldn't ask the question unless there was clear evidence to suggest that both parties are doing this and undermining the reporters. If they don't like what's said about them, they will then go against those individuals. They'll put it out they're not engaging them. They'll put it out they're not impartial. If they don't say things they want to say, it's no different from in the US, frankly, between, say, Fox and a CBS News, where there's some people believe that the traditional media is against conservatives and that Fox supported conservatives. And that's true in some cases. In a lot of cases, probably is true. People have some biases, but to say that you don't go against them, when it's clear that the questioner is telling you that you do, and you're saying that you're opposed to 4 and they're opposed to 3, that's not good.
Next question is from Dion Jackson-Miller, and it goes to Mr. Golding.
Mr. Golding, Coswell Barnett is a blind Jamaican who is also a very experienced and very qualified teacher, but who was out of a job for 4 years. Now, your manifesto promises to protect the right of persons with disabilities. Those Jamaicans are disproportionately affected by poverty. Vision 2030 says that governments haven't been living up to a reserve a percentage of public sector jobs for persons with disabilities. That would have helped people like Mr. Barnett and others like him. Would a PNP government implement such a recommendation?
Thank you for that question, Dion. I come from a family that has delivered transformational national service to the country, in particular in the area of persons with disabilities. My father was the first orthopedic surgeon in Jamaica, and he established what was then the Polio Center, became the Mona Rehabilitation Center. And when he died in 1996, it was named after him. It's now called the Sir John Golding Rehab Center. He also established the Hope Valley Experimental School, a school for integrated education for able-bodied and children with disabilities. 2 parliamentarians went to that school, and he established the National Road Safety Council, because of his awareness of the fact that many people who end up with disabilities is as a result of road traffic accidents. I am and we are very committed to implementing the UN Convention for the Persons with Disabilities, which Jamaica was the first country in the hemisphere to sign. And we are the ones who passed the Disabilities Act, brought it to Parliament. This government took 7 years to bring it into effect. We're glad it's in effect, but it needs to be actualized now in practice so that persons with disabilities feel and see the benefits of it. We are fully committed to that, and we are going to establish a National Disabilities Fund to aid persons with disabilities so that they can have their assistive aids, they can get help to establish themselves in business at home and improve sidewalks for their transportation. We are committed to the community of persons with disabilities.
Dr. Holness has the opportunity to respond.
To be clear, one of the things that I'm very proud of is that my administration has reserved under special orders through the NHT houses for persons with disability. They have a direct access. Under the new social housing program, we make it a point of duty to support persons with disabilities, and many persons with disabilities have benefited. Our administration have brought into effect the Disabilities Act. We continue to support the disabled community with grants and an increase in PATH benefits. Our government is committed to supporting persons with disability in Jamaica.
Dion Jax-Miller has indicated that she would like to take her second follow-up question.
By the way, I'm fine with both of the answers for that one question. Probably give them even hard for the opposition to say about what they have done. They can talk about what they plan to do. They have been in power for a long time.
Yes, Mr. Golding, we hear the broad statements of policy and principle, but what persons with disabilities want are jobs, which is why I'm asking specifically if your administration would implement a recommendation to reserve a certain percentage of public sector jobs for persons with disabilities.
Yes, we have committed to that. Across MD&As, ministries, departments and agencies, that we would like to see quotas or an allocation for the disability community to have the benefit of employment opportunities in the public sector. But we also recognize the need to ensure that those who have the capacity to deliver services or to make things at home are empowered to do so. And that's why we have the National Disabilities Fund, which we will establish to help them to get a start in life in the area of business and fulfill their talents and monetize their talents so they can uplift themselves and their families from their homes. So yes, we're fully on board with the idea that you mentioned, Jan.
Dr. Holness, to rebut.
Most definitely. We will do that and we will do more. In fact, at the Office of the Prime Minister, we do make it a point of duty to ensure that persons with disabilities are employed at the Office of the Prime Minister, and we will give that directive, if it is not already in effect, to all the ministries. But more than that, people with disabilities want to be independent and they want to work independently, many of them. And we, through various initiatives, including through the various development funds that we have, will provide resources to persons with disability so that they can start their own businesses. And I think that is really the critical thing, to ensure that our persons with disability are independently earning income.
Our next question still goes to Dr. Holness, and it comes from Giovanni Dennis.
Dr. Holness, communities like Charlemont, Birdsucker, Acadia, and many others across the corporate area have complained and have taken the government to court for inadequately regulated developments. Justice Hart Hines, in a 2021 ruling, said the KSAMC and NEPA have been dilatory in their mandate to enforce local planning laws and regulations. In December 2021, he said work was being done to restructure the entire approval process. Yet the issues persist. Why isn't more being done to force the KSAMC and the NEPA to do their jobs to enforce the building regulations?
When that comment was made, the situation was as you have said. Since then, there have been significant improvement in enforcement, and including a new planning order for Kingston and St. Andrew, which clarifies many of the issues that were in contention, including we have included more inspection officers at the KSAMC, and there are more cases now being brought to court which are being prosecuted. So there has been an improvement. However, I believe that there is still much more work to be done in terms of increasing the enforcement capabilities. And yes, there are some legislative changes that need to be clarified, particularly as to how titles are issued and how densities are approved.
Mr. Golding has the opportunity to respond.
Since the People's National Party assumed the leadership in the council of the KSAMC, the new Mayor Andrew Swaby has been pursuing internal governance reform, including persons from outside, to try and improve standards and processes, make them more transparent and effective, so that the citizens of the corporate area can expect higher levels of governance. I think it's unfortunate that in the case of Mr. Holness and his wife, they are in the business of real estate development, or certainly she is, and that presents serious conflicts of interest which have manifested themselves in some of their own schemes that they have developed. I think we need to have rules which preclude that kind of activity so that there's no question of conflicts of interest.
We've come to the point in the...
I think the point he's making there is that if you read the Integrity Commission report and the approval of one of the buildings that the Holnesses had in Beverly Hills, where they built not in accordance with the building plans they had extra rooms, etc. And when their inspections were done, those inspections didn't point that out, even though I do think the way it was worded, it seemed like only a blind person, not to be overly, I'll just say it seemed like a blind person would have noticed it. If you're an auditor, you should have noticed those changes that were made didn't align with the plan. So what he's alluding to is that he's alluding to the fact that if you're conflicted, you oversee the organization that makes a decision. They won't hold you accountable when you're the one making the building violations. And we know this has been a problem in a lot of instances in Kingston and St. Andrew, where people have not been in accordance with the building code, and these things end up in court.
Debate when the debaters get an opportunity to ask each other questions. We begin, we invite Mr. Golding to ask a question of Dr. Andrew Holness.
Mr. Holness, the Integrity Commission, in their court filing in the case that you brought to try and strike down the act and eliminate the offense for which you are being investigated, have said that you had money in the Ponzi scheme Olint and you got it out, while others suffered losses. You had money in Cash Plus, another Ponzi scheme where people lost lots of money, you got it out. And of course, you had money in SSL, and you were able to withdraw your money before it collapsed. In fact, I would say the only person that Usain Bolt has not been able to catch up with is you. And I want to ask you, how do you think and why do you think the people of Jamaica should trust you to be in charge of the governance of the country for a third term with that track record and with that cloud hanging over your head?
The leader of the opposition is a liar and cannot be trusted. I lost money in Cash Plus and Olint. However, the PNP accepted and received $1 million from Olint. He has no credibility to talk about Ponzi scheme. They benefited from the Ponzi scheme to fund their election campaign. He questions my wife's integrity about development. My wife and my family are hard-working Jamaicans. We started off with the taxes like many other Jamaicans, and I have worked hard. He has sought to weaponize that. But the people who receive me when I go into the country, they say, Andrew, don't worry. No weapon formed against you shall prosper.
Mr. Golding, your rebuttal.
I've made the point that for the Prime Minister and his wife to be in the real estate business when so many of the agencies of government which regulate that business fall under his Ministry of Economic Development and Job Creation creates the possibilities for conflicts of interest, and I stick by that position.
So this is an interesting point where both of them are fighting about who benefited more from supposed financial organization that failed. The Prime Minister mentioned that Olint, one of the organizations that failed, gave $1 million to the PNP. And the opposition says, well, you got money that you invested in Olint, in SSL, all these failed schemes. Now, how come the Prime Minister invested in all these failed schemes and he got reimbursed? And secondly, if he's going to accuse the opposition of taking $1 million from Olint as a contribution, didn't he invest with them and he said it was a Ponzi scheme? I'm surprised Golden didn't come back to him and say, you're saying we took from this organization that they gave us, but you invested in them and got your money out. So aren't we both culpable if you say I'm culpable? And the zinger about Usain Bolt can't catch up with the Prime Minister who got his money out when most, if no one else, got their money out. The Prime Minister didn't deny that he got his money out of SSL. But both didn't get his money out. It's really interesting, actually, and showing you how convoluted these things are.
We now invite Dr. Andrew Holness to ask a question of Mr. Mark Golding.
The leader of the opposition speaks about integrity and trust. He was an advisor to a former Minister of Finance that put in place a policy of high interest rate, for which he acted as a broker for the government to invest loans and bonds for which he received a commission of high interest rate, to the point where one of his members described this as the greatest transfer of wealth from the poor to the rich. He, the Topanaris lawyer, has made billions of this, yet he does not disclose this in his integrity report. In fact, he doesn't even have a house in Jamaica. How can we believe you? And do you have assets in overseas companies for which you have not disclosed?
I've disclosed all my assets, and that's why my Integrity Commission declarations are certified. Your allegations are scurrilous and false. You made reference to DB&G, although you didn't call the name. DB&G was established in 1992 as an investment firm by 3 young Jamaican entrepreneurs. When the financial sector meltdown occurred some years later, and FinSAC was established as a response to try and protect the savers of this country so they didn't lose their money in their deposits in the banking system and their pensions and so on, DB&G, like other financial firms at the time, had to navigate that carefully to survive. We eventually were approached by a leading international bank, Scotiabank, who did a thorough due diligence on the company. It's a listed company, where we were a listed company from inception. Our audited financial statements are public. Our quarterly financial statements are public. They looked at us inside out and upside down, found nothing, absolutely nothing untoward, and they bought the company. And we have nothing to hide on when it comes to DB&G. I would say, why is your government, having spent $200 million on this Commission of Inquiry into FinSAC, hiding the FinSAC report? Is it because you and your wife bought a house from somebody who had been FinSAC'd? You're a hypocrite, Andrew Holness, to be accusing me of anything in relation to FinSAC when you have been a direct beneficiary of the losses of somebody who was FinSAC'd, who lost their home because of it.
So this is a really interesting one. Now, I'm not going to tell you I'm an expert on the Jamaica financial meltdown. I understand what FinSAC role is. I understand what he's talking about. So there's a couple of things. Golden didn't answer the fact when the Prime Minister said he doesn't have a house in Jamaica. That's weird, people. He doesn't own a house in Jamaica. His dad was a pediatrician. I'm sure there's a money transfer. He's been a lawyer. He doesn't have a house in his name. He didn't dispute that fact. So that's interesting. But what Golden mentioned about the Prime Minister buying a house for, I think it was 140,000 US, when there's a mortgage of about 1.7 million US on that house, and that house being valued a year later for about 400,000 way back in 2002, those are facts. And there was a FinSAC loan that bought that house. Now, I'm not sure if the loan was taken out way in excess of the house's value, and people sort of splurged that money, because I think a lot of people got hurt. Things were done inappropriately. Now, people didn't go to jail who should have gone to jail. But you can see the financial shenanigans that happens in the elite in Jamaica. That's what I take away from this, right? And the Prime Minister didn't deny that he got his money out of SSL. It's really interesting to see where people put their money. When things go bad, certain people don't get hurt. The people who don't have the connection, the linkage, get hurt. And those who don't get hurt. Now, I know Golden talked about, there's a whole discussion about how high interest rate were. But if you read the whole construct about what transpired at that time period, a lot of bad decisions were made by a lot of people, obviously including people like Golden, who were involved in providing advice about what interest rate was out there and had the implications of interest rate on people's eventually, that way people go under.
Again, Mr. Golden, you go to attacking my wife when you, according to the Contractor General's report, benefited from a sweetheart deal that was irregular.
So let me just say this. I am not comfortable where the prime minister is basically playing the sympathy card of saying you're attacking your wife. Your wife is a member of parliament. Your wife isn't. So I read Integrity Commission. She's part of those I love those transactions. You're a family. Your assets are not even commingled. She's not on. Hey, you go to look at the Integrity Report. Her name is not on any of his bank accounts. I don't know how that works. Okay, I think if you're married for all these number of years, you have to have commingled assets. There's no commingling. She has her own real estate development companies. She has those assets. That's why she's been brought up, because she's a member of parliament, right? She's a member. So what you're saying, you're attacking my wife to play sympathy with the audience. I am not. I agree you shouldn't attack people's family members, but if they're a public figure and they're your wife, they're fair game.
You benefited off the backs of the Jamaican people in creating your wealth. You were a connected party with the then Minister of Finance, and you advised and created the FinSac debacle with high interest rate. You benefited from FinSac. I did not purchase a FinSac house. I bought a house on the open market. And again, you come with weapon.
I don't think that was true, people. If you read the reports on this, open market means it was a house that was out there, probably fair bidding, because obviously it was underwater, and you buy the house. One of the questions that was asked, and I read some article on that today, which is, it was not in the open market. They don't know how the transaction occurred, but it was bought at a very favorable purchase price.
Lies. Your lies will not work.
We now go to closing statements. Now, based on the earlier coin toss, Mr. Mark Golding of the PNP will go first.
The general election next week, Wednesday, presents a historic opportunity for the people of Jamaica. After 13 and a half years of belt tightening and austerity, we are finally in a situation where the debt to GDP ratio has achieved, or is on the cusp of achieving, the 60%, which was written into the fiscal rules by Portia Simpson Miller. That means that the fiscal rules and prudent economic management can change gear and look at how we can grow the economy and build a society with a better quality of life for all. We see some serious issues that need to be addressed. 700,000 Jamaicans or thereabouts live on public land, lands where they've built their homes, but they don't have titles. The colonial era law set the period as 60 years of occupation before they can get ownership. We are going to reduce that to 25 years. We're going to give them titles. And that is going to unlock over $1 trillion of wealth, which is now sealed up and quarantined in the old colonial era law that is still on the books. That is why also we're increasing the threshold to 3.5 million, so working families who are struggling to make ends meet can get a little break so they can live a better life. It's why we're going to be removing the tax from the overtime pay of workers earning up to $6 million, so they can make it easier in life as well. And when I govern the country as Prime Minister to serve you, I will ensure that accountability and transparency are at the center of what we do, and any hanky-panky, any violation of the public trust will be met with the full force of the law with no protection from me. And that is a huge difference between the government I will lead and the government of Andrew Holness. That is why I'm asking you, on Election Day, next Wednesday, vote for the People's National Party, put your ex beside the head, time come for a better life.
We now invite Dr. Andrew Holness of the JLP to go ahead with your closing statement.
The administration that I lead on your behalf has cut the debt in half. We have created 280,000 new jobs, brought in 85,000 persons into the labour force. We have tripled the minimum wage. We have cut murders by 55% over the last 3 years. You have had no new taxes to worry about. This administration has taken on the previously thought of impossible to solve problems, and we have solved them. We are an administration of performance. In our next term, our pensioners who have worked so hard will get a break. Those earning $6 million or below will pay no income tax. We will give a new income tax rate, which will be graduated, which will see everyone paying lower taxes. You will see 60,000 more houses being brought on the market, with 15% of them dedicated to young people. We will give incentives to developers to build houses for young people. You will see a new transportation system for rural school children coming into being. You will see more work being done on reducing electricity. Our government is a government of performance. This election is about a clear choice: promise or performance. That's what it is. You have to make a decision. Who can deliver? It is this administration that has taken on the difficult problems, and we have delivered for you. I ask you on election day to vote for what is best for Jamaica. Vote for a government that performs. Vote for the Jamaica Labour Party.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Holness. Thank you, Mr. Golding. In the good spirit of the debates, we now invite Dr. Holness and Mr. Golding to shake hands.
So what are your thoughts? That's the end of the debate. What, 18 plus questions with follow-up questions? What are your thoughts? If you want to call in, you can do so. What are your thoughts on the debate? Your perspective? Are the candidates believable? Do you believe in their program? Do they make a lot of sense? As you look to the future, are they the people to bring the country forward? As the Prime Minister says, they want execution. It's interesting to see what they communicate to the people as to what they're going to be doing. Golding talked about giving land, a lot of land which people have sort of captured, and reducing the time period for them to get titles for those lands, increasing threshold for minimum wage, removing tax for overtime pay, something like Donald Trump, removing tax for tips, free up GDP to pay benefits, and something which he didn't say explicitly, but he's going to stamp out corruption, which to me is inherent in Jamaica, to be frank. And Prime Minister is going to, as obviously he's been a Prime Minister for a long time, so you can talk to his record. They have reduced debt to GDP. They're going to reduce, they have increased, tripled minimum wage, not going to have no new taxes. They're going to bring 60 new houses on board, reduce electricity. When somebody mentioned what they're going to do, and they've been part for 13 years, my question will always be, unless it's something really new, what have you done before? Right? But the opposition is not in power, so they can only talk about what they're going to do. If you are in power, and the Prime Minister, they're a party of execution, and they've executed a lot, then the question that arises, always going to arise, is, couldn't you have executed more? Are the people better off today than if the PMP was in power, or should they be better off than they are now? Right? I didn't hear anything that's revolutionary in this debate. I thought they were both good at what they do. I thought the Prime Minister came across more vigilant, more robust, more in attack mode. I thought as the debate continued that Golding sort of lost some of that luster he had at the inception of the debate. As he continued, it looked like he got a little bit tired, and lost some of, initially the discussion started about corruption and evolved from there. I went into more of what things that should be done or what things have been done. But if I looked at it holistically overall, in terms of net, if you think about the substance of what was discussed, if you think about how you judge debate, which is about content, organization, rebuttal, delivery, and sort of civility, which is important, there was no knockout. I thought it was a split decision, and I thought I would have given Golding just coming out ahead, frankly. But at the end of the day, I thought, given the corruption element, which Golding tried to exploit, which the Prime Minister keep coming back to, because it's dogging him, that Golden could have pushed harder and hit him harder in those cases. And in areas like the Rio Cobre and some of those areas, when, as I said, when you're the incumbent, you're more susceptible to be attacked because there's going to be things that you haven't accomplished, there'll be things you should have accomplished. But you can also extol your own virtues about what you have done, and it's been significant. That will resonate with people. Farmer is saying a party should not be campaigning on promises. That party should campaign on solid achievement and tell what else they're doing in the next term. Yes, I don't disagree with that, actually. I don't disagree with that. That's what the point I'm trying to make, which is if you've been in power for 13 years, there's a lot to talk about. You can be attacked on a lot, especially because you don't have resources. But you have a lot you can talk about your accomplishments. Now, there are some things that wasn't talked about today in terms of infrastructure that the JLP has achieved, but there's a lot they haven't achieved because the most fundamental question that was asked, there were two questions. One was around voter apathy because of view of corruption. One was about, don't tell me about stats because I want to pay my groceries bill. There's another about attacking oversight bodies who are put in place to oversee and to govern. And when things don't go your way, you're going to attack them. So there's a lot to assess, pull out, challenge. But I thought it was a good debate overall. Who was determined to be more prime ministerial? I think it probably was Holness. Who was more effective in terms of substance, even though you may not see it because of how you present? I thought it was Golden. Who was more civil? I thought it was Golden, because I think the prime minister was always use the word "you're a liar." When Golden may use euphemisms, say you're not telling the truth or you're not being transparent. And a lot of times, Golden wasn't lying when it comes to things he called about the prime minister. And when it comes to things about him and his party, such as, in my view, I can't really substantiate this, about the decision about approving the increase, I call it the triple increase for Parliament and the public sector, but mainly for Parliament, when the PMP first came out and said yes, they supported, and then came out subsequently and said something else. I don't think I believe what Golden said about that in terms of how the decision was arrived at, in terms of them changing their tune. So if I was to walk away with this, there was no knockout in terms of the debate. I think Golden nipped it. But I thought the prime minister, given being dogged by the corruption issue, did a very good job, frankly. Because I don't think, if I was the one on the other side, I'm beating that to death all night. Now, it ain't going to decide the election. People make up their mind already. This is what Jamaica politics is. But the fact that he didn't call out Holness having a house in St. Lucia. His house was registered in St. Lucia, people, to avoid paying Jamaican taxes. There's a basic way of positioning that to call out the prime minister about some things he did. I don't know if Golden read the integrity report like I read it, but some of the things about the transactions he undertook, how much conflict of interest he had in terms of people who he did business with and who were in Parliament and who names with people were with, the 28 plus bank accounts, who was in the bank accounts, the money that moved between the various bank accounts. There's a lot there to decipher. And if you can't make a case about the economy, about basic sustenance, about some of those things, you have to find vulnerability and attack those vulnerabilities all night. Now, he did it a few times, but he did it in a nice way, right? Now, you don't have to defame people and say they're corrupt. Let's make the position to say, you know what, I think you're corrupt. Whether it's corrupt or not, the fact that there's so many unanswered questions, the prime minister keeps saying he's been clear. He has not been clear, right? The Fence Act thing needs to be further exploited. What was Golden's contribution to the financial debacle in Jamaica that led to the need to establish Fence Act to oversee the financial industry, right? The question around constitution and constitution change and constitution reform, what's principle versus constitution, there are a lot of questions you walked away with which weren't clear. I thought the moderator and I thought the questioner did a very good job in their initial questions. I didn't hear Dennis ask any follow-up question, which was, he asked some of the more difficult questions, but they needed some follow-up, right? And they weren't there. So overall, you walk away saying, hey, it may have been nicked by Golden, but people could say their person won, or it was a draw. I don't have a dog in the game. I don't have a fight in the game, so I wouldn't push back on anybody. It's very subjective about who won. But the prime minister came off very defensive as related to the corruption item, because frankly, he really doesn't have a leg to stand on. Golden, somewhat defensive when he came to, well, not somewhat, he was defensive when he came to the waffling by his party and certain things. He didn't really answer to me the FinStat question really well about the high interest rate and his contribution to it and being an advisor. He talked about them being bought by Nova Scotia and them being audited and all that. It's all good, but did you contribute to it? Right? Holness didn't answer the question about him getting his money out of all these companies that failed. It's amazing that you can do that. They can get your money out of all these companies were doing Ponzi scheme or things like SSL. You got your money out. Most people didn't. Where's the leadership? So anyway, I appreciate you being here. Thanks for coming in. It's interesting to have these debates. And I was talking to someone I'm pretty close to who was telling me about Guyana having their election. She said they don't have any debates. So I think Jamaica should be happy that we had 3 debates here, and one with the Prime Minister and the opposition, and it was pretty civil. And what I like about this whole election period, in prior years, we'd have a lot of violence around election people. It seems more of a happy time. It reminds me back in the early 70s. I was probably a baby then, but way back in the early 70s when Jamaica had election before the 1980 election, before the CIA got involved and Cuba and Russia, where things were much more civil, right? And then after that when guns become prolific, a lot of gun came in the environment, things changed drastically. We seem to be moving back into that sort of time period, even though there are a lot of guns still on the island. So hopefully things will improve. The JLP has been in power for a long time. I think there should be term limits. I don't know why we don't have term limits. You can't be prime minister for life, frankly. Either party, if you look at the polling, it's interesting. I think one time the PNP were leading pretty good, and now that's changing. It's probably closer to being much closer election than one can imagine. But whichever party win, at least we know the leaders do have some substance. They do come across as state persons, stately in a sense. They look like they both can lead. And hopefully they are thinking more visionary in terms of what next. Because I'm telling you, the way AI is going and the implication of AI, countries like Jamaica are going to be much more damage as countries like the US. The US is going to have a whole bunch of people in the next 5 years get cut out of the work environment. And we're going to have to things like universal income, which may materialize. I don't know what Jamaica is going to do. Right? Are you going to be able to have people sustain themselves if they're not working? Now, we have a large service industry, and maybe that diversification was talked about is an interesting point, because if Americans don't have money to spend on vacation, what happens to Jamaica? That has to be thought about. If Americans got to cut back the material on vacation and where they go for leisure, and we spend so much of our effort in the hospitality industry, what happened to us? The question should have focused on the diversification of the economy significantly, to then allow people to develop certain skill sets to work across different disciplines, and that would also improve GDP. This reliance on America, to me, given where we're going, is not the right approach. But anyway, people, thanks for being here. Don't forget to hit the like button. I appreciate you joining me, and I'll be doing more of these programs or these shows on this channel. I'm trying to get to a point where I only do sports on Cranky Live, and here I do all these other social matters. And thank you for supporting the channel, because I'm making good progress. My hope is that in the next 3 or 4 months, I can get to a point where I have that clear bifurcation between the 2 channels, and it's clear I'm doing sports on one and doing these type of shows on this channel. So thanks for being here. Appreciate you being here, and peace out. Have a great night and a great weekend. And by the way, before I go, tomorrow, so I get myself in trouble though. Tomorrow at 3:30 p.m., I'm having a discussion with Pastor Lansley Blake, talking about the God question, right? Is there a God? What does that entail? If there is really hell, why we have goodness and evil all side by side? We think about the celestial environment, the cosmos. What does that entail? Is there something truly like evolution? Is that real? So we're going to some of those questions, people. We may not have all the answers, but I mean the conversation is important. Because sometimes we stay away from these things, but we face them every single day. And we shouldn't hide from things that make us uncomfortable. I'm a proponent of embracing things that make you uncomfortable. That's the only way you address them and get some kind of solace and some kind of comfort. So hope you can join me tomorrow at 3:30. It'll be on both Cranky Live and this channel. So please join me and have a good evening. Have a good night. Peace out.